It's an adult fantasy sci-fi, so if you're around, please come in and hear what he has to say. Second thing, I just wanted to remind you, if you hadn't heard already, we are opening our third store over in Caldwell. We are shooting for an opening in mid-November. It's the Indian Creek, I believe is the name of it, the Indian Creek Plaza. We're very excited about that, so if you get a chance, come Christmas time, come over and see us over there. We're very excited about renovating an old bank into a bookstore, so it ought to be a lot of fun. Our guest this evening has won, and I'm going to read from this, has won first place in fiction and second in poetry at Boise State in 2013. Oh. She is the recipient of 3 Dell Awards and is a Pushcart nominee in 2016. Her work has appeared in the Boise Weekly and Idaho Life, in addition to dozens of other places. She also has another occupation, and I will let her tell you a little bit about that when she gets to her next book. So please welcome me in giving her a round of applause, Marri Champion.
Glad I could get up from there. The knee's doing well. So, I was expecting a few more of my writer friends this evening, but I've got one. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a writing idea, and that is that writers, over the course of their life, their writing life, get a lot of advice, and they get it first from family and friends, and then from mentors and teachers and professors and other writers. So I'm going to ask Karen, because she's the only writer that I know here, what's some of the things that pop into your head when you think of writing advice that you've got? What's one mantra that keeps repeating that you got as advice?
Just to, I guess the one that's the most vivid to me is kill your darlings.
Is what?
Kill your darlings.
Kill your babies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about that one in a long time. Do you guys know what that means? Kill your darlings or kill your babies? Places in the story or in your writing that you're really fond of that are not working for the story, and just kill them. And they're the hardest things for you to let go of, because you really are they're in there for some weird reason because you're like fond of them. So, how many people have heard that a writer should write what they know? So, okay, that's great. What do you know? What does a person know? I write fantasy, science fiction, paranormal ranch girl mysteries. That's my genre for this, right? So let's call that all speculative fiction. How do I write what I know and write speculative fiction? Anybody have any ideas?
Describe the environment in which it takes place.
Yeah, so it really comes down to what do you know? And what I know is food. I brought you all some food tonight so you would know what I know. You know when you're hungry. You know what tastes good. You know when you love someone, be it a child or a mother or a person, a partner. You know when your heart is broken. You know when you're in pain. These are the things you know. How does that fuse into the idea of speculative story and become a confinity of words or story that you, as the reader, can say, oh, I almost think that's true. Well, you do that by giving your characters that understanding of love, that understanding of pain. You you create from what you know that place that's believable, and then you add the speculative part, and people go, that could be real. I know if I just open my door and walk out, I could walk into that story. So what is it that you as writers, if you read something speculative, if you read science fiction or fantasy, what is it that keeps you reading it? You don't stay reading it?
Something that needs like an explanation, like you want to know the explanation behind it.
Oh, so you want to see what happens?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good reason. What else would keep you reading?
Connection to the characters.
Yeah. And that's what you know, isn't it? That's where you can really dig into that idea of what you know. You could present something almost absurd to somebody if they believe that character. If they can dig into that character, that's a really good point. So, I write about shape changers. In almost all of my non-literary stories or my poetry, I write about a shape changer. How would I know what a shape changer is like?
Because you've gone through so many different phases in your life.
That's part of it, yeah. But what about that guy, your best friend's husband? He's good looking, he's a CEO of a big company, he's got a really good reputation, he makes a lot of money, he's really upstanding in the community, he does all kinds of really great things, but he's at home raping his 12-year-old daughter. How about you go to church and you listen to the sermon and you know the preacher, you take advice from him, you've known him all your life, and he's molesting boys for the last 30 years. Is that not a shape changer? He doesn't change visually, but he really is not what he seems to be. And in that way, you can really understand what a shape changer would be like. All you do is apply a physical change that reflects that other person that lives inside that soul. So there's a lot of myth. There is a lot of legend, especially in Hibernian culture, Celtic culture, Norse culture, about shape changers. There's actually legends about it in Asian culture too. I'm just not familiar with them. In my next book, in the sequel to this, I have a shape changer that is a little more traditional than the one in this story. And that was because I looked around at what everybody was writing, and I thought, oh, well, I need to write something that's popular. What should I do? I don't like vampires, so I want to write about a werewolf. So I researched all of the legends of werewolves that are out there. And the one that was interesting to me, who reads history? Who knows about Roman history? Do you remember the statue that they say was... Yeah, tell me about them. Who were they?
I think they were orphan kids that suckled on the wolf.
Oh, but were they orphan?
I don't know.
Yeah, so the founders of Rome were sons of the wolf. So I thought, well, that's interesting. That's really interesting. what if we had Homo canis lupus instead of Homo erectus? I mean, what if this was a whole race of people that, except for a few, had died out? And that is where I got the idea for the character in the sequel to this. I didn't want him to be an anti-hero. I wanted him to be kind of a hero. So he cooks. He's pretty good looking. He only kills bad people. So, you know, that was how I came up. That was how I could develop something I knew and weave it into this idea of a speculative story. So, what about Silverhorn? What was my idea for Silverhorn? A lot of you know that I lived in Garden Valley for a long time. If you've ever driven up to Garden Valley, you go up, it's that 17 that goes along the river, the South Fork of the, you go up 55 and then you turn and you go toward Garden Valley and you drive along the South Fork of the Payette. And you get almost to Garden Valley and there's some columns. Oh, hold on. I knew this would happen. There's some old bridge columns. Right, right as you come out of that long stretch where you're along the river and you make a big turn. And it's called Deer Creek Bridge. The National Guard blew up that bridge a long time ago. I don't even know the reason. They just took the bridge out. And on the other side of the river, it's to actually physically get to that other side of the river, you would have to go probably 100 miles around through Centerville and then go west, or you could go over there in a boat. But I always thought that was interesting. It was mysterious and interesting, and deer could live over there a long time and never die. And about that time, my kids were reading Watership Down, and I thought, oh, I could write this really cool story about a deer, this whole bunch of deer that lived in this place you couldn't get to, and their genetics would change, and they'd be different, and eventually they'd all leave except for one, and he would be lonely, and I never wrote that story. It was just an idea. I kind of wrote like a page. And then I finished my first novel, which was 180,000 word epic fantasy. And about that time, a guy named James Waller, anybody remember that name? He wrote a cute little short book that everybody loved called Bridges of Madison County. And I saw him in an interview, or I read an interview, and he said he wrote it in 6 weeks, and he'd never written anything before. And I thought, it took me 4 years to finish this book I just wrote, and I was kind of like, okay, I have a master's degree now, and I've been going to all my writing classes, and I can write a book in 8 weeks. And that was a challenge I gave myself. And right about that time, my dad had passed away, and he left me this cool statue that's in bronze, and it's entitled Deer Dancer. If you want to pass it around, you guys can look at it. And I thought, oh, well, there's this Celtic myth about this woman called the Morrigan, who's the battle queen, and she would go into battle shaped like a black hooved creature with horns, and kind of like a red deer, but like not a really nice red deer, like a very angry red deer. And she would kill all the men in the battle. didn't matter what side they were on. And then she'd shape change either to a woman or to a raven and fly away. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Maybe I could write, And I sat down and started writing Silverhorn. And it took me 7 weeks. Then I thought, I didn't beat Waller, but I met my deadline. It took me probably 4 months to edit it after that and make it right, but that was where Silverhorn came from. Just from that whole Celtic myth. You know, the Hibernian people and the Norse people have all kinds of creatures that change to human, seals and deer and whatnot. So those to me are very interesting. And I try to find a way I can fuse that into a story that I'm writing what I know. And what I know is people. I know how people behave. So that's what I did with Silverhorn. I know the mountains. I had a friend read this and he said, you've been there. And I said, yeah, I have. Because I've been up the mountain. You know, I used to hunt by myself for weeks at a time. So that's where the idea came from.
What's her name, the one in the picture? The statue.
Oh, that's a deer dancer. It's called the deer dancer. And that's a Native American myth, legend. I don't really know much about it. I just have the statue. In Silverhorn, I used an epigraph at the beginning. When I was a kid, my mom read philosophy, biography, autobiography, history, and poetry. And she just could not understand where this kid came from that liked fantasy and science fiction and all these weird things. And most of you know she was a costume designer. She won an Academy Award for designing the costumes for A Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm. So where did I get this fantasy idea? Really? Come on. She couldn't understand it, but we had a library. It was pretty big. And she had the poetry up kind of high, and then I had 2 shelves down low. And I had Robert Louis Stevenson and some other kids' poets down there and kids' books, and I thought, must be something interesting up there. And I'd climb up the shelves and I'd find the poets and bring them down and put them on my shelf. So Edna St. Vincent Millay wound up down there, and E.E. Cummings, and this guy, Whitter Binner. And he was a poet that my mother actually knew because he spent the last of his life in New Mexico, where she went to school. And when I read this, I read it a long time ago, this poem. And it's sad, and it's about loss. And it really fits right into Silverhorn. But I want to read the whole poem to you, not just the quote that I used. It's called Dream. I had returned from dreaming when there came the look of you, and I could not tell after that, and the sound of you, and I could not tell. And at last, the touch of you, and I could tell even less then, though I shivered and fell as at the very mountain brim of dream. For how could the motion of a shadow in a field be a person? Or the flash of an oriole wing be a smile? Or the turn of a leaf on a stream be a hand? Or the bright breath of sun be lips? I can reach out, and nothing will be there. None of these things are true. All of them are dreams. There are neither streams, nor leaves, nor orioles, nor you. Silverhorn. Wide the water between root and twig, and great the argent magic. Ancient the circle that tied us to the wild tower, to the primordial blade, to the silver-branched crown. We forgot the Leophale, forsook the emerald land to worship the glittering mountain on swift and mythic hooves. The wanderers named us Heart of the Wind, Staghorn. The old ones called us Scythe. There are none to call us now but root and stone. The canyon. The yellow pine bark was rough. Her breath came hard and her heart hammered. Below, Silverhorn Creek rushed over stairs of granite that cupped water into dark pools. Wind in its lofty top swayed the ponderosa's massive trunk against her gloved hand. A finger of air touched her cheek. It smelled of fall. Any moment, the sun would clear the eastern ridgeline. Lines of light fanned the pale sky. Her stomach growled. Across Silverhorn Canyon, the granite staggered into gray distance. She could never climb those crags, even if she found a way to cross the creek in its deeply carved valley. She never had. Willa shrugged the sling from her shoulder and sat on a stone above the trail, resting her rifle across her knees. She raised her binoculars and scanned the stone ledges. Nothing moved. Suddenly, light flashed in a leggy pine. Her heart tripped. It was only a bird, a camp robber. She sighed. She saw nothing. She always saw nothing. Maybe the legend wasn't true. Maybe nothing lived in the Silverhorn Crags. Maybe the Silverhorn Stag was a myth, like gods and alien abductions and politicians who didn't lie. Willa didn't believe that. She believed with stubborn insistence in the unbelievable. But why? Why should she believe in a legend? A very old legend. She believed it because Sarah Blackhawk told her it was true. She believed it because Sarah's husband, Joseph Yellowgrass, almost a legend himself, had once spoken of the legend of the Silverhorn as if he had witnessed it. She believed it because something inside compelled her to believe it. Silverhorn Crags was a fortress where people didn't go because they couldn't. Other than crossing the uncrossable creek, the only way into the high country of the Silverhorn was to go hundreds of miles around through roadless wilderness to the east. No one did that. This made for mystery. People were tantalized by mystery. The Native Americans had legends about the Silverhorn, and Idahoans in New Britain had embellished the stories for a century or more. Occasionally, someone came to town and tried to uncover the Silverhorn's secrets. They left eventually, defeated by the impossible granite. Willa stood up, shouldered the rifle, and looked down. This spring, the snow melt had been phenomenal. Runoff rushed down Silverhorn Canyon 20 feet deep. Chocolate-colored water had climbed the canyon walls until the tops of trees rooted at the normal water line were submerged. Boulders as big as a pickup truck had moved. The sound of them bouncing in the flood shuddered the canyon. The reservoir that held the water for the ranch stock had ruptured and the lower fields flooded, drowning much of the winter wheat. Now, though, the water was low even for October. Summer had been hotter than usual, with not a hint of rain since May. For the first time in Willa's life, the headwaters of the Silverhorn held no leftover snowpack, even in the highest peaks. Water in the Silverhorn would never be lower unless it stopped altogether. Tomorrow she would hike the West Creek bank, down in the canyon below the trail. Maybe she would find a way across the creek, a ford that had been hidden by the water until now. Once every year she made the difficult journey up the west bank of the Silverhorn from its confluence with the Middle Fork to where the creek fell from sheer granite. a hanging glacial valley cut eons ago. If she found a way to cross the creek below that point, she might be able to find some unseen path that climbed the granite of the East Canyon wall. Willa climbed another mile up the steep path. Maybe she'd get lucky and find one of those big bucks that lived in the canyon. Every couple decades, some hunter shot a silverhorn muley that wandered away from its home territory. The event inevitably reawakened sportsmen's interest in the area. Willa's dad had shot a silverhorn buck when he was younger, before he lost his leg in Desert Storm. The trophy hung over the fireplace. It was a record for a non-typical buck killed with a bow. The silverhorn deer were uncommonly large, even for high country mule deer, and had atypical racks with more than the 4 points of a standard large muley. Her biologist friend Reggie said they had unusual genetics. Her stomach growled again. Sunlight lanced through the red leaves of the huckleberry bushes and the yellow aspens. The glare made her eyes water. She turned to go back. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of movement. The gray coat of a deer flashed out of the brush and crashed away uphill. It never stopped to turn, so she couldn't tell if it was a buck or a doe. She glanced down. Sunlight reflected off the granite and water. In an elbow of the creek, flood boulders were stacked high. Across them lay the trunk of a fallen tree, uprooted from the far creek side. The broken end of it almost touched the west bank. Willa stopped breathing. Something hot shot through her, as if she'd swallowed an ember from a campfire. Slowly, she let her eyes roam upward, appraising the sheer rock on the opposite canyon side. Her eyes stopped at a glowing clump of aspen. Light flashed from something brilliant. Wet leaves, she thought. The gleam off a forked branch blinded her. When she closed her eyes to cut the glare, a ghost image swam black and green against her eyelids. It looked like a branched crown above two luminous eyes. When she blinked, nothing was there. Her dad had taught her still hunting, and she was almost as good as he had been. She stood unmoving for another 10 minutes, but still saw nothing. When she finally turned down the path, she had to hurry. She didn't want to miss her father's doctor's appointment. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, I will cross the Silverhorn. A strange dread came over her suddenly. She heard a distant cry. It sounded like a cougar. She glanced behind her. The sunlit path was empty. She shivered and began to trot. Another thought settled on her then. Tomorrow, my life will change. Can you all hear me? Yay for that loud voice. Stops kids, dogs from going in the street. Man stands face to face with the irrational. He feels within him the longing for happiness and for reason. The absurd is born of the confrontation between human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. And that's a quote from Camus. At the cafe, Sonny, the Labrador retriever, jumped into the back of the pickup. He'd sleep all the way to town and all the way home without moving much more than to get up and wag his tail when they came back to the truck. Willa fastened her seatbelt and started the engine. Her dad sighed and leaned back. "How was hunting?" he asked. "Nice, saw a deer." "Buck?" "Don't know. I'll check again tomorrow. I didn't want to be late." "I appreciate that. What will you do while you wait?" "I'm meeting Reggie at the cafe. Then I'll do some grocery shopping." "I'm sorry to take so much of your day." "Dad, don't say that. You know it's no big deal. This is important." The new prosthetic leg would take time to fit and extra time for her dad to learn to use it. There also were some recent developments related to Gulf War syndrome and some innovative treatments Dr. Lossman planned to try for her dad's lingering fibromyalgia and sleeplessness. That's a hard one for me to say. The doctor wanted to run a few new tests. About last night. Don't worry about it, she answered brusquely. I can't help it. I know, Dad. It doesn't matter. I really don't mind. But your blood test today is important and you shouldn't have alcohol in your blood. I didn't mean what I said. I know that, she said and smiled at him. I love you. I don't deserve it. Yes, you do. You're good to your old man, he laughed. His face was seamed from squinting into the sun, but his jaw was still strong, and his blue eyes were focused today. Well, Captain McLeod, you're my only guy, so I guess I have to be, she said. What about that genius guitarist, Ramon or something? Rincon. His name is Rincon, Dad, like the surf spot in Santa Barbara. Rincon Young. He's just another guy. They're all the same, except they aren't all good guitarists. When's your next gig, he asked. He was studying her. She wondered if she looked odd or if something was out of place. She touched her spiky white hair. Self-consciously, it felt normal. It was even paler than her dad's hair and just as short. Her straight, firm jaw was like his, too. She recognized her own reflection when he tipped his head and looked as stubborn as she felt. She was wearing black. She always wore black, so nothing was unusual there. The moonstone earrings her friends had made for her were longer than her hair. She always wore them. They made her feel as beautiful as they were. The tiny diamond on the side of her nose caught a beam of light. Her dad's attention was distracted by the flare, and his eyes finally dropped. Friday, at the Mississippi Studio in Portland, and then Saturday at the Shadow Box in Seattle. Then we'll do some recording here in the ranch studio, some new stuff. The band will be staying in the bunkhouse until the show at Boise State before Thanksgiving. Good money? It'll do. I can afford groceries. Her dad sighed. What? She said. I wish you would finish college. I wish you would quit drinking, she shot back. He was silent for a few seconds. Reggie Ann has a good job and a husband, he said finally. So, she said, impatient, I have a job. Singing in a band doesn't last forever. I'm a writer, not a singer, she said, and I don't need a degree or a husband for that. You need a man, he said bluntly. I have you. Young women need more than their dad, their lame, drunk old dad. You're my hero. Some hero, he scoffed. Besides, a vibrant, beautiful woman in the prime of her life needs a man for physical reasons. She needs sexual fulfillment, not a hero. A young woman can't have sex with her dad. Why not? She asked, knowing how he would react. Well, Reagan McLeod, that isn't even funny. His expression was shocked and angry. You think that never happens? Not in a normal world. You shouldn't talk like that, even in jest. If someone heard you say something like that, they don't understand your odd way of thinking. Geez, you need a mother. He ran his hand over his face. Make up your mind. Do I need a man or a mother? You have a sick, sick sense of humor. Where did you get that from? He met her eyes and she smiled wickedly. And not from me, you didn't, he protested. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shock you. I'll sleep with Rincon if it makes you feel better. Shit! He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. He was silent the rest of the way to town. She helped him get out of the truck, but he refused to lean on her and used his cane to walk into the doctor's office. She kissed him on the cheek. His eyes were still bloodshot from last night. After the tests, you need to eat. I'll bring something by or send it over from the cafe. Don't worry about it, he said gruffly. I won't. And this is for those of you who have read the former version of this book. This is a very new short chapter that we added when we published this. As wanderers, and I think it's like chapter 6. Don't know, they're not numbered. As wanderers, we crossed the ocean on ice and dry land. It was a time of glaciers, and we followed the herds. We were starving. We were frozen. The old ones welcomed us, took us in, fed us, protected us, told us stories of the heart of the wind. We remembered their stories. We kept the stories in our hearts. and protected the city until they passed from the land. We still keep the watch. The story keeper. His brown, steady fingers fed the tiny fire just enough dry fuel that it wouldn't smoke. Light from the flame reflected in his hazel eyes and glinted from a place inside him so ancient he seemed to peer inward into dreams instead of outward from memory. Often, for Joseph Yellowgrass, memory became dream, and dream became memory, inseparable, impossible to distinguish one from the other. Do dreams glimpse into the past and peek into the future at the same time, he wondered? Could his vision span across the wheel of time to reveal whether his dedication to the watch was futile? Or was his diligence still vital to the thread of a story that had almost vanished from time's weave? When he tried to see into that distance in waking time, all he did was remember the past. And the past was infinitely sad. In the forgotten Bitterroot tongue, his name had been Young Mountain Lion Who Walks the Tall Winter Grass. His family and friends called him Yellowgrass, and now he barely remembered how his name looked and sounded in the ancient language. He had watched many of the old ones leave the sanctuary mountain, entire family lines plucked from the weave, some to the finality of death, some to vanish forever, and one family to guard the access to the Silverhorn. He was there for the death of his friend Aod McVin from a clan Arab, holding him in his arms as his friend bled out, and had leaned close to hear Aod's final whisper, "Keep the watch, my friend. Watch over my sons." Time passed, and Yellowgrass watched helplessly as Aod's eldest son, Kelwick, was felled by a trapper's bullet. By then, as far as Yellowgrass knew, he was the last story keeper. Joseph Yellowgrass hunted the high, inaccessible meadows and mountains of the Silverhorn Crags alone for a long, long time, and he watched the Silverhorn until almost everything he had known was lost. Those were the decades upon decades of anguish when he searched his soul for a reason to keep anything. The stories, his promise to Aod, the fruitless watch over the mountain. Then he met a young clanswoman with strange, beautiful eyes so deep that looking into them was like staring into his own soul, and whose hair fell through his hands like cold black dreams. She too was groping blindly for answers that were unfamiliar to her, because her blood, unlike his which had been crossed with the old ones, was pure clan. Her name was Sarah Blackhawk. She became his soulmate, his anchor in this swiftly changing world, and the strength he needed to keep the faith. She too became a story keeper, even though it wasn't in her blood. Of all the things that surprised him, she was the most unexpected. She gave him a reason to live and a new voice of hope when all his hope seemed lost. She was the one thing he would never be able to cleave from his spirit. He might have forgotten the name he was born to, but Sarah Blackhawk gave meaning to his new one. Joseph put more small pieces of wood on the fire. It didn't smoke, but threw off simmering warmth that kept his hands from freezing. He was careful and concealed. In all the years he'd watched, no one had ever seen him, or stumbled across his campfire on a dark night, or come face to face with Yellowgrass unexpectedly on one of the thin, high trails of the Silverhorn Crags. There were many ghosts who haunted the mountain. Yellowgrass was just another shadow that vanished into the rocks or faded into the trees. Joseph Yellowgrass favored this high overlook in the crags when the need to be especially vigilant compelled him to spend more time at his watch. The ledge was almost inaccessible to anyone who walked on two legs, and Yellowgrass used a hidden path up to the sheltered niche of granite. From its vantage, he could gaze down the entire length of Silverhorn Creek and out across the pastures of the McLeod Ranch. A playful dervish of air caught at his fire and swirled tiny embers above his head. He climbed to his watch every day since Sarah told him that Willa McLeod had found a way to cross the creek. He'd watched her cross the water, and in that moment he felt time shift and move strangely. He knew that his life had changed, that all of their lives were forever changed, and he felt a shadow of darkness slip into the canyon that day. He pulled the cape of the mountain lion skins around his shoulders to keep the wind from chilling his back. He was an old man. He'd almost given up on dreams. If not for Sarah, he might have. But how does a story keeper stop being a keeper of the stories? Could he just go down the mountain and fade into the new world as if the Hawk clan never existed? When he mused on that idea, he knew that leaving his watch or leaving the world by choice were not options for him. Joseph Yellowgrass raised his wise, age-seen face to the wide sky. Tiny flecks of snow touched the hard, high plains of his cheekbones. He was handsome still, and his skin, while weathered, was supple, nothing like the brittle, dry parchment he had touched on the faces of generation after generation of tribesmen before they faded and let themselves die. He began a song. Wide the water between root and twig, and great the argent magic. The slow, mournful chant drifted down the Silverhorn as nothing more audible than the errant voice of wind in rocks. Do you guys have any questions, any comments, any? Nothing?
Question for you.
Sure.
You said you wrote to the deadline. Did you find that you were in a situation where you felt like you were taking any shortcuts, or you wanted to take it a little farther, or you felt that deadline was more important than?
Yeah, that's a real reasonable question. I think I did probably take shortcuts. So when we did editing for the second publication, we added a couple of chapters to clarify.
Let's cut you off at any shortcuts that you might have taken a little farther, but you opted not to.
Oh, you mean the story itself to go further?
Because you thought you were writing to a deadline.
No, I think I told the story I wanted to tell, and I thought about it kind of as if it was a long short story. So it's nothing like the one I had just finished. That's, well, I guess some people could use it as a doorstop, but 180,000 words compared to 70, that's a lot less story, a lot less detail. But, you know, people tell brilliant stories. Tim O'Brien tells brilliant stories about Vietnam in 20 pages. So there's no reason why a story can't be short and still be full and complete. I had to think about it differently, not go too many places with it, and keep on track. It was a little tricky because I tend to be long rather than short. She knows, she's read a lot of my stories in class. So, but yeah, I think that the characters appear in the sequel, so their story continues. There's a lot of it in Howl. So I don't think there wasn't much to add.
You never felt rushed.
No, I didn't, actually. No. Surprised. Surprised that it went so quickly.
You said you spent about twice as much time editing. Did you do your own editing, or do you have somebody else?
I did my own.
Tell us about that.
Oh.
'Cause
It's, editing
did
is,
you have to throw out a lot?
not with this story, it was just more correction with this story. It was more fixing word choices or fixing punctuation and spelling and I don't remember,
Copy it.
yeah, I don't remember changing a lot, clarifying a few things.
Did you have to kill any darlings?
Hmm?
Did you kill any darlings?
Did I kill any darlings? No, not in this book. There's a darling in the sequel that my publisher wants me to kill and I don't want to. So we're still thinking about that one. But no, this one was, something about it was easy. Maybe because I thought about it a long time before I started writing. I don't know. It was magic. Anybody else?
So will you sign books? If we can buy them, right? Will you
Yeah,
sign them if we can
sure.
buy 'em?
And you get to take home cookies. Sure.
When will the sequel be out?
So the sequel, I shouldn't tell you this. The sequel is actually available.
Oh.
Didn't I give it to you, Howell?
Oh, is that the sequel?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, but my publisher wants to republish. This one, I looked for a publisher for Silverhorn for a long time and couldn't find one, so I used CreateSpace and published it. And then I wanted to turn it, this is kind of cool and interesting. I wanted to turn it into a digital, because that's what everybody has, they have Kindle. So I wanted to turn it into Kindle. And I was chatting with a friend of mine probably about politics or something ugly one night at midnight, and a friend of his jumped in and asked me if I was a writer. This was on Facebook, of course. And I said, yeah. And he goes, because I like the way you phrase things. Do you have anything I can read? And I said, well, yeah, I've got 8 books or 7 books or whatever it was at the time on Amazon. And he goes, well, I live in Israel. Do you have anything in digital form? I said, no, because I'm an idiot and I can't do it. And every time I try, it deformats the whole book and you have to go page by page and fix it. And he goes, okay, I'm a publisher. My wife puts manuscripts into Kindle format, and it's $100 standard, which anybody, that's pretty standard, no matter who I had talked to about it. And we'll do it for you. And I thought, well, he's a friend of this friend. They work together in New York. I thought, okay. I just finished the Trinity Fire, had a little money, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And I sent it to them, and the next day he calls me, Israel, and he says, we don't want to put your book into digital format for you. And I said, what? He said, we want to publish it instead. So that's how that happened, which was pretty cool. And I had to take it down. You can't imagine how hard it is to take something off of CreateSpace until you try to do it. And all the people you have to talk to about it. But that's how it happened. And then we spent a year editing it, and this was the result. Actually had a little blurb in Writers Weekly. So, any other questions? All right.
Can I get a round of applause for Marri this evening? Okay, thank you all so much for coming. There are copies of Silverhorn available at both registers, so grab a copy on your way out, get her to sign it for you. In a few minutes, I'll take her over there. We'll be over in the middle of Lit section over there. We have a table set up where she'll sign books for you. And obviously, you'll probably have some questions that you haven't asked yet, so I'm sure feel free to talk to her then. But thank you all so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
And by the way, I did make the shortbread that I promised to bribe you all with so that you would come. So it's over there and there's tons of it, and there's, in the brown sack, there's some white bags and you can take some home. Please take some home, because I will never be able to eat 4 dozen.
Please, please,
Please, please, I've been losing weight. I don't want to take them home.
Do you want to move over to the signing table?